But good morning everybody, and thank you for attending. Today you're at the Getting to Good on Planning training, and people know me, I'm Wendy Med, okay, and I'm presenting this this presentation. Okay. So first of all, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping rules. This is a slide done by Angela Wright, and she does it absolutely swimmingly and very fine. So I've sort of taken her slides to go through with you. First of all, just to confirm everybody's signed in. Yeah, okay. We have got a fire, we are expecting a fire drill this morning, or a fire alarm every Friday morning, as people know, 10 o'clock. I do anticipate in any event this session should be finished by then, but it's just to be aware. It's the only day I've been able to say that, because every other day I've had to say we're not expecting a fire alarm. Okay, so mobile phones, can I just please ask you to turn your mobile phones either off or on silence, because it will be distracting. You have the finish time is scheduled for 10:30 for this presentation, but I think there's been a series of presentations, and I think you'll probably realise we anticipate these won't last they'll last between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on audience participation. So you know, if we get some good participation, it's going to be about 3/4 of an hour. Okay. And you have evaluation forms. Can I please ask you, these are mandatory sessions, as people know, and if you don't sign in, you'll sort of you'll get a letter, you get a naughty letter. So can you please make sure you sign in, okay, and fill in your evaluation forms. Okay. So first of all, just to remind people, I'm sure you've heard this over and over, the purpose of these sessions, it's to support a consistent approach to our practice. People will be aware we've had Jane Humphreys, an ex-DCS from Stockton, who's had an opportunity to look at our practice and make some observations. And we've taken on, she's been supporting the senior management team and looked at practice. She's done some file audits, and she's gave some sort of feedback around consistency of practice. And we felt it was really important to get back to basics, if you like, get back to basics on the stuff that we do. And you'll be aware we've had some sessions on, we've had a general Getting to Good session on what a good file audit, what a good file should look like. We've had a Getting to Good session on chronologies. We've had assessment, and it follows that this session will be on plans, and then there's a session following these, or there's a series of sessions following these on supervisions. So what they're meant to be is a marker in the sand for us to discuss with workers what we expect. From a basic perspective, what we expect our standards to be, and from there on in, we'll sort of measure what's being discussed within these meetings, and we'll see where we are. Because for many years, I think there's been practice and assumptions of practice that we do it this way, and that's come out in the sessions when we've been talking about planning. People have talked about some confusion about planning, and that might come out today as well. So a line in the sand. This is what we're saying. I've got to say the Getting to Good, well, certainly the Getting to Good presentations, they are pretty basic in terms of what you learn, but it's a consistency that we want to get to. So you might find what I talked to today about is repetitive, but we're really keen to get the message out there, consistent message, so we can implement it in practice and measure how we take that forward. Okay, so as I said, this session will explore what a good plan looks like. Just put another slide up there, just on briefing objectives, just to be very clear and just to emphasise the point. So what I hope you will get from this session is I'll be able to outline to you what is good planning, what is planning, and what makes a good plan, and very importantly, how we monitor plans. And then we'll also discuss the review process, discuss what that means when you review a plan. What does that mean, the purpose of that? And we'll also outline the current planning format. And again, you know, we recognise that we have some pretty streamlined planning in child in need and the child in need protection arena. And then we, it's quite different from the looked after plans, so we know that. Okay, but I'm going to talk to you in a little more depth about that. Okay, so the first slide I've put in about the planning process, but just before I go through that, I just sort of want to say, from my perspective and my view, is we spend so much time on completing assessments. We do some really brilliant assessments in Redcar Cleveland. They're so detailed. We know absolutely everything about the family, the way they function. We gather that history, that depth of history, and very detailed and very useful. But in terms of planning, it almost seems as though that the energy for me is within the assessment. And then when we come to that very vital, so what? So we've got this family's information in an assessment, and what we're going to do with it, and that's what we call planning. And when it comes to that part, it almost feels as though sometimes the energy has been so spent on that assessment. When it comes to the planning, sometimes that can feel as though that's the afterthought of it all. Well, actually, that's your vehicle to bring around change. And if we don't get that, if we don't get that plan right, how will we ever begin to identify a problem and bring around change? So that's what I'd sort of say from the onset. Do people recognise that? Do people think I'm being unfair by saying that? Just in terms of at the end of the process, it almost seems the plan is the add-on, and we've got this beautifully shiny, detailed assessment. Don't know, do people recognise that, or is that an unfair comment?
I think it's fair.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So let's just then go on to the the very basics of the planning process. So to begin with, we absolutely must have. It's imperative that we've got the children and families in the middle of our intervention, because a plan without them at the centre, we won't achieve what we want to achieve. If we go along with we identify through our detailed assessment, our detailed, beautiful assessment, the issues within this family. If we do that, without having them at the centre and them recognise and being on the same page as us, and then we start to identify our first thing is to decide what our outcomes are. If we don't agree those outcomes with our family, we won't be able to achieve what we set out to achieve. So very importantly, the child and the family at the centre of everything we do. And then to be very clear, decide on what outcomes we want to be achieved. Agree that must be agreed. And once you've reached that agreement, you can plan your service and the interventions and actions, and that's very important. It's taking some time out, and just like going back to that stuff that I'd said about all that energy and that work that goes on in the assessment. Sometimes it almost feels as though, let's get this plan done. Well, actually, you must plan a plan to plan your services, to achieve your interventions and your actions, if that makes sense. And also, if you're going to have a successful plan, to deliver a plan, you must be able to deliver the services and the interventions that complete the actions. So if you set out on your plan, we need a little bit of this and we need a little bit of that, and we'll have some family therapy here, we'll have some substance misuse services there, and if them services don't come in and aren't effective, the planning process will just stall at that point. And we must always monitor the progress of the implementation of the plan. So how are we doing? Are people still on board? Are people still doing what they want to do? And then, of course, to complete that planning process, we must review and evaluate our achievements and outcomes. There's nothing on there that's complicated. There's absolutely nothing on there that you didn't already know, but I just need to sort of reinforce to you sort of what good planning is. just put another slide in again to re-emphasise. In its simplest form, planning is what needs to be done. What needs to be done? We've got this understanding as family circumstances, family situation. This little boy needs this to go on to achieve. So in it, what do we need to do? How does it need to be done? We've got to be very, very clear about that. How are we going to do it? We've got to be thinking about how we're going to do it. And again, it's very important about when it needs to be done in terms of time scales. We can't be putting time scales in that we're going to lose interest, that are going to be unachievable. So we've got to be sort of very clear on that. And by who, who is going to be around this planning? And what resources do we have? And that is what resources do we have, and not what resources we hope to achieve. That's about what we can achieve, not actually in an ideal world we're not going to be. We would think this is a really good resource, but actually we can't source that. It has to be around what resource do we have. That's not to say we do our plans around the resources that we have, but there's a balance to be struck about being able to achieve and deliver on your plan. Okay, so I'm open for some audience participation before I get to the next, before I start discussing these principles, because these are the principles that underpin effective planning. But first of all, I just want your opinion on what you feel our planning format. What's your opinion of our planning format in Redcar and Cleveland? I did already allude to it sort of a couple of minutes ago, but that's my opinion. You guys are doing your job on a regular basis. So in terms of that planning format, when I talk about planning format, I'm talking about the plans that the template of the plan. Is it helpful? I don't know, could I just have your views on that?
I think it's, for me, I just feel sometimes it's quite negative, so it's always about what you're worried about.
Yeah.
So when kind of suppose in child protection, you go through the plan section by section and it's so negative.
Yeah.
So I had a family last week who at the end of the meeting kind of nearly walked out because there was nothing positive in there, and it was just like constantly at them.
Well,
and
okay.
I just feel like it could have been there could have been something nice in there.
Okay. When we get to the point then, Suzanne, where it says because what needs to change and how will we know we get there, do you think that at the end of that planning process that's a really good place for a family to can you actually measure the progress more because we're clearly setting on from the onset? We're worried about this, but actually we'll know what success needs. But I guess what you were saying, aren't you, from the very onset, is that when you're on that beginning of that planning process, it can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think this case I'm thinking about is just I've been transferred it from another social worker, and the wording in it, the family felt as though it was really, really, really negative.
The wording in the plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just around kind of having no insight into like domestic violence.
Yeah.
And they just felt like that was untrue.
Yeah.
And I think it's just to bear that in mind, that it was really, really negative. And this is a difficult, complex case, but I just think the wording in it was...
And that goes to the very heart of what I said a few minutes ago. If we are going to write a plan, and it's very derogatory to a family, how do we expect from the onset to get them on board? So there might be some issues around domestic violence. Domestic violence might be causing their children massively significant harm, but there's a way using language about that to get families on board, and it is, I guess, it's about the way we write, Suzanne, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of...
Because there wasn't any negative in this plan.
Yeah.
It's all negative.
It's all negative.
There's nothing positive whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm coming to kind of review that, I feel like I need to put something
absolutely.
nice in.
Absolutely.
I think what came up from another session was other social workers from the field particularly talked about trying to identify the achievements but not have the plan 100 pages long. So we thought that was something that should go to the protocol user group when Jane Woolman was setting up that. And there was 2 or 3 issues, wasn't there, when they came out that need to go to the protocol user group, which some of you will be probably an active member of. And it was things like being flexible and being resourceful around the plan and not overloading the family with too many negatives, so that it's bit by bit, and not worrying too much about let's get the plan done and then let's move on to the next bit. But identifying the achievement, so you can say to the family, look, this is what you've done really well and this is what's worked, and then there's a balance, isn't there? But obviously you can't keep that adding to the plan and the plan becoming huge, so there's some technical issues to get around, which I'm sure we'll be able to, as part of better using protocol as well, better using the database.
Okay. Anybody got anything else to say, add to Suzanne's points?
I think you need to break it down, don't you, into sort of bite-sized bits and achievable bits, because then, you know, rather than sort of go, well, I don't know, if you think about a goal yourself and you say, for example, you know, 10 months I want to be like 3 stone lighter or something. It's unachievable, you can't sort of see it happening, and but if you sort of break that down, you know, well, in 6 weeks I'm going to do X, Y and Z, and then you can see that positive progress. So then as a family, then you'll be getting that sort of those more positive messages within core groups or within child in need meetings, and then they start to sort of own the plan more. They start to feel more confident because they can see that actually, you know, things are a little bit different, and then that sort of has a more positive impact. And it's also sometimes, like you say, the family can feel so overwhelmed because there's so much to do. It's maybe about talking to them and agreeing with them. Well, what's your priority? What's the, you know, and what's our priority in terms of what we need to see change first? What are we most worried about? Let's just focus on those bits and put those in the plan. And then when we revisit it, you know, we can, when those are achieved, we can look at other things rather than families maybe thinking that they're being set up to fail from the beginning because it's too overwhelming and there's so much that they need to look at.
I think the heading is what are we worried about? And I just don't feel like that's helpful.
Okay,
that's
then.
That's my opinion. Especially it's quite easy, isn't it, to be able to add in sort of what are the strengths or something along them lines. Do it so they can see that. You do, but if it's got that heading or something for a family to read it, it's a little bit, do you know what I mean? It's clear.
And I think that come around because we did have previously, I absolutely take everything, you know, completely agree with what you're saying, and I think that came on because the worst thing is a woolly plan. So it's almost, we're setting out from the onset, aren't we, what we're worried about. And I take your point, it's about what language you use. It's as Joe said, it's agreeing your goals with your families, it's agreeing, it's that family in the centre, and then agreeing how you want to, what you're going to do to achieve those goals. But because just to remind people who from maybe the who are working in looked after service, or from an early help point of view, if you don't know, which I'm sure you do, but the headings are pretty simple from our child in need and child in need protection plans. We've got what you're worried about, what needs to happen, who needs to do it, by when, and how will we know when we've achieved what we set out to achieve. So it's very, very easy, very, very easy language, and that was introduced, you know, so families from the onset will be able to recognise where we want to get to. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the start to look at the principles, and plans must be comprehensive. It must address unmet needs and consider all options. It's got to be efficient. We can't build delay in. We can't have plans continuing on for 2 years and not making an achievement. That's part of the reviewing process that I'll talk about a little bit further on. But we must be snappy with our plans. We must set agreed goals with families, and they must be able to see the progress. And if we can't see progress, we need then to think about a different way. It might well be that our concerns are becoming increasingly more, and that takes on another dimension, and that's around your legal advice, and because we can't have children in situations where we're not making an improvement and that plan isn't working. And again, you know, my absolute, my mantra about it's got to be children and families who are affected by it. You know, they've got to be involved in it. They've absolutely got to be central to it. And again, sometimes we can forget about this. It's to be integrated. I think we're good at giving people naming jobs to do in plans, but it's almost that integration means participation and collaboration and contribution. So it's not just giving a task that you think, oh, it's not going to happen. I've asked this professional to do that. I'll have to do that, because we have got a tendency to do that as social workers. We have a tendency to, to think we can actually, do all this on our own. Absolutely not. Don't be doing it on your own. You've got partners who bring lots to the table, and they've got lots of skills, and we really need to evidence their contribution in plans.
I think as well, isn't it? It's identifying who's best placed to do a piece of the plan,
yeah,
and who best knows that person
yeah,
in the family, and who's got the best skill. It doesn't always have to be the social worker, does it? It should be, you've got lots of other support workers and early help and personal advisors.
And it's that flexibility as well, isn't it? So at one point you're going to have somebody who's particularly talented at maybe doing some individual work with that child or young person. You might have a parent worker who's got a fabulous relationship with the father, and the social worker might have a brilliant relationship with the mother. It's our interplay. It's actually during your reviewing process saying, actually, how are we getting on with the plan? How are we achieving? Do we need to change that? So it's being flexible. It's been absolutely flexible. And
it's also about holding those people to account,
absolutely,
isn't it?
yeah.
Sometimes we I think social workers, they will write their own names or write sort of what they're doing in the plan, and then if there's like an action for school or something, it'll say, school.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, actually, who's
school?
Who's going to take ownership of that? Yeah. Who's the actual person that's going to do that work, and how are they going to feed back?
Yeah.
And if they don't come to the core group, or they don't come to the child in need meeting, and that action's sort of continuing, then we need to sort of escalate that and hold those professionals to account. Absolutely,
rather than getting on Joe, and because of your time constraints that you've got to do, sometimes it's quicker to do it yourself. It goes back to, isn't it, when our children are small, tie the shoelaces for them because it's going to take them forever and a day. That's the analogy I'd give you. It's almost by hanging on in there and pushing it back where it needs to belong and getting people on that bus with you. And again, it's got to be logical. Every step of every part of the plan has got to lead to a next action, and transparent. Everybody understands what their role is in that plan. What outcomes do we want to achieve? What actions have we got to do? So it's got to be transparent as well. Just a slide around what makes a good plan, and it's a plan. A good plan, it's not a list. It's not a list of things to do. You've got to have a clear idea of what results you want to achieve. And you should be very specific. So it has to be realistic. It has to be achievable. You have to be able to track your progress and measure against what you set out, you said you were going to do. Again, we've said it. Clearly defines responsibility for the implementation. It identifies assumptions, so it's very clear. And I think, as we've talked about our planning format, that provides a platform for that. And it motivates people. It has to motivate people, and I think we spoke in other sessions about a couple of years ago when we used to have long, laborious plans. You might come to a child protection conference and you might have 20 points in your plan. Well, that must be so overwhelming for a family to come into a conference and professionals around a table are saying, well, actually, there's all this stuff wrong with your parenting and you have to achieve all this. How demoralising that must be, and how unachievable that must be for you to be able to deliver on. So it's got to be, it's got to be a plan to motivate. And I think we have, or I hope we're in a place now where we're identifying maybe a handful, 5 key issues. I think that's what we should be seeing in plans no more than 5 key issues that we actually need to, these are the wicked issues that we need to address. So that's what a plan should be, and that will keep motivation, and it's kept alive through monitoring and review. What does planning involve? It's again setting out who should be involved. Again, repeating what I've already said. It's what outcomes we want to be achieved, and it's prioritising those outcomes and agreeing actions that need to be achieved, and clarifying any inputs and resources. And that again is if somebody is responsible for implementing peace parenting work, it's making sure that resource has been identified and being put in. I guess I would say at this point, and again looking for some involvement from yourselves, we very often see we very often have a number of plans. So you've got a child in need or a child in need of protection plan, and along there somewhere you'll have an EHC plan. The child might be subject, or the young person might be subject to the event process. They'll have a PEP, they're looked after. But I'm not sure, and certainly Ofsted told us when they came to visit, our plans just don't talk to each other. So we have parallel planning. You'll have that plan running there, you'll have that plan running there. But sometimes those themes aren't all brought together in one plan. And I guess I'm interested to get some feedback from yourselves about why that is and whether you recognise that. So you might have all those different needs being addressed in a different specific type of plan, but actually we need to get much better at bringing all those themes into one plan. And I guess, is there what's the blockers to that? Or do we think we do that in any event?
I think it's more probably that you kind of put it as an overarching thing as opposed to putting, so say for example if you had an educational healthcare plan, you might put in your child protection plan or child in need plan that needs to be adhered to, or those specific things from that. But then in hindsight it's probably quite a good point really that if you get the educational healthcare plan you can put the actions out of there actually in your plan. And I can only speak for myself, but I've just never really thought about it before. So
you were saying, Maria, I think you're saying you reference your other plans, but you don't specific. But I guess from a EHC plan, such a very important plan, because if we don't get those educational elements and health elements correct, it's going to affect the overall outcomes for that young person, isn't it? So I guess it does make much sense that those really, really fundamental, because a plan is made because something needs to happen, something needs to change, and you need to achieve an outcome. So there's something about when you're thinking about your planning, gathering all those very different important little plans that you've got and evidence in that in one overarching plan. And as Sharon said, Sharon spoke earlier about the ICS user group that's going to be set up, because we know we've got absolutely lots of functionality on the ICS system that we're not using that will make your work, we'll be able to demonstrate your workings out on your work more. We'll be able to get that system to work, and we'll be able to get that, get all our evidence pulled in. So in terms of planning, in terms of pulling every element of different plans in, hopefully something good might come out of that as well.
The only thing I would add also is about, obviously because we're budget managers, is being resourceful and actually thinking about when you're asking for resources, what you're asking for and why you're asking for it and what benefit it's going to be. Because sometimes there can be a tendency just to ask for lots of different things in the hope of getting one thing. And some of you have been to resource panel and know what that's like, but I think it's really been very clear, because resources are tight and budgets are strapped, so we've got to be very, very resourceful about it doesn't always need lots of extra input when the answer lies within almost with your own skills and our own people.
But it goes back to the assessment, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we've assessed the need, and this ties in very much with the EHCP, then it has to be in the plan. And you know, if there's an assessed need, that resource has to be in the plan for the child to progress or young person to progress. But in terms of SIN plans and CP plans, are families involved in producing those? Are agents or do social workers just do them on their own? How does that? I'm asking, you know, honestly, how does that SIN plan or CP plan come?
It's like from your assessments, or you. I would say that we do write the plans
On your own,
I think, I can only speak for myself,
Yeah.
but part of the assessment you talk about what you're worried about, don't you? So in essence you don't sit down and physically write it with them, but it's about transparency, isn't it? So as long as you're open with families, then essentially there should be no surprises when you're taking an assessment out. So
I think what I said around kind of when you review the plan, so that family are a bit unhappy about that plan, so actually I'm happy to amend it to make it kind of their plan as well, to make
equally,
it's going to work.
Yeah, but equally, if we have got great concerns, it's about open and honest about those concerns and what are we going to do together with the family to address them. I was only asking, you know, completely honest because the EHCP is written with everyone around the table and everyone kind of contributes to that and owns it. I was just, you know, asking how the SIN and the CP plan work.
And actually, for those of you who've looked after children 16 plus, in the field and in the LAC team, those young people 16 going on to being a care leaver should be really helping to write their own plan. And I think a lot of you do that anyway, the young person is definitely involved. But that doesn't mean it can't be done earlier, of course it doesn't. But certainly at 16, when the care plan changes to a pathway plan, then those young people should be absolutely knowing what their plan is and what their ability is to achieve the outcomes with your helping yourselves.
Because don't forget families. Families are the main resource. We'll write a plan. The family might be in crisis, and we'll write a plan to assist the family. But our intervention is a snippet in time. They're living their lives. Their resources are within them, and the ability to change is within them and their families and their wider circle. So it's about us including in that the plan to assist them to address their own difficulties, because we'll never do that. We are only involved for a short period of time in family life. Families live their lives, so they are the major resource, and you know, can't overemphasise that enough. Okay, planning involves deciding on timescales, who's responsible, how the plan will be monitored, how the progress will be checked, and again, it involves the implementation of the plan. Just going to go on to ways of monitoring and review plan. Seems a simple thing to do, but sometimes we're onto that planning platform and we do these formal monitoring through a review meeting, or we have informal inquiries through our observations, our contacts with families, our case notes, our supervisions, our sharing of information. So that's your sort of formal processes of reviewing your plan. So just in terms of how to review a plan, you've got to ensure that you're focused on the results or the outcomes. And I know that you're thinking that is so basic, but I'll give an example of we undertook a file audit for the back in December around the joint targeted area inspection, and it was a particularly difficult and complex family situation, and the previous children had been removed from these parents, and they were doing they'd had the care of a newborn baby, and they were doing extremely well. And there was a comprehensive, absolutely comprehensive plan around this family, and they were doing extremely well. And we moved forward 6 months, and things had started to, and all agencies had ticked off, they'd achieved their targets on the plan, and had stepped aside, and they'd moved out from the family. So 6 months on, we'd got to a plan where actually the only people who had around the table was the health visitor and the social worker, because we were doing brilliantly well with the family, so we thought. The wheels came off that, and things weren't what we thought they were, and the family went in crisis. And it seemed to me, when I was looking at that case, it seemed to me there was a period of about 8 weeks where the family situation had changed so much, and those agencies need to get back around that family. But there was such a delay because they'd actually felt they'd completed their work and it was complete. So we had to go through their whole process, but we'll have to make a referral, we'll have to do. Well, actually, that mum needed that intervention at that time. And there's something about, you know, keeping your focus of when you have achieved what you want to do in your plan and you've reviewed it. It's around putting a contingency in there, because our families bump along the bottom. And if we are then, if we think we've achieved something, we haven't, we finish service, and then we can't get that service back in, you know, what's the point of having, and the family are in crisis, and it takes them to a really dark place. You know, that's not what we want. So that's what we're talking about when we're reviewing results and outcomes. So it's not just a short-term review, it's actually a longer-term review with some contingencies in there. And did the plan set out to achieve what it was meant to? And what difference did it make? What difference did we want it to make, and did it make it? What are the desired outcomes? And we need to be asking ourselves when we review a plan, are they still relevant? And that goes to the heart of what I've just said in terms of that example. Is the plan still relevant? Okay, and has there been any significant changes in the child's circumstances? Well, certainly in the case example I gave you, there was some significant changes, but it took another 8 weeks for that plan to start to get back on track. So a successful review of a plan would set up some systems that you didn't have to wait that length of time. It would be absolutely straight in. Again, this is quite a bit of a repetitive PowerPoint, and it's about focusing and monitoring a plan. It's just how are we doing in relation to the planned outcomes? Has everybody done what they're supposed to do, as they did with the file audit situation? If not, why not? And are we on track? Did something unexpected come up? Absolutely, yeah, in the example I gave you. But were we flexible enough to reignite that plan? No, we weren't. And do we make adjustments to the plan? That's sort of very, very important when you're monitoring plans. Okay, and that's it. And finally, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your attention and an opportunity for you to ask any questions. Okay? No? Okay, thank you very much. Can I just remind you again to please fill in your evaluation sheets and just close the session. Thank you.
Yes.